Quiet room Q. 7 had one rule in bold: do not look through the viewport. The glass fogged from the inside anyway, and the quiet on my side of the door started feeling like a test. Probation reviews don't care about context. A compliance bot scored every incident report, and my last 2 shifts already sat in the red. One more: failure to verify before morning and badge access would drop to visitor level, which meant no job. At 2:07 a.m. Friday, my key ring clinked against the door plate while my thumb did the double tap on the latch I picked up overseas. Anyone who has worked nights in a locked unit knows the building makes honest noises when it sleeps, and that night the hallway made none. Rules keep people safe. This one kept the room fed. A thin strip of paper stuck under the viewport frame fluttered even though the air in the corridor sat still, and a peeled revision sticker with a simple crossed mark clung to the metal like someone tried to scrape it off and gave up. The shift binder lay open on the cart where I left it. Coffee ring dried into the corner, and the first line under quiet room protocol looked clean enough to pass an audit. Do not look through the viewport. The next line started with if, and then toner fade swallowed the middle. Silence in a facility never stays neutral, so my hand hovered near the wall phone while my eyes stayed on the door handle. A voice came through the intercom from the nurse's station, flat with tired. Status on the seclusion room? Stable, I said, and even while the word it left my mouth, guilt tightened behind my teeth because stable sounded like a promise I hadn't earned. The charge nurse didn't ask for comfort, only proof. Visual confirmation logged? My pen touched the check sheet on the clipboard, hesitated, then made a neat mark in the box that meant I had looked, which saved the nurse from a citation and kept my audit score from taking another hit. The lie looked professional in ink, and my stomach did that small roll that comes from knowing paperwork lasts longer than people. The binder's laminated card slid half out of its sleeve when I shifted the cart, edges curled from cleaning spray. A clipped note on the back carried a second voice, unofficial and meaner, written with a felt tip that bled into the plastic. If the room goes quiet, do not confirm by glass. My fingers tightened on the pen until my knuckle clicked, because the printed line under the bold rule kept tugging at me, half swallowed by the toner fade, like a mouth trying to form the word that mattered. A soft click came from behind the door, not a lock, not a hinge, more like a power strip turning off, and the steady white noise that usually leaked through the padded seams cut cleanly. The clipboard trembled in my grip, and my job brain did what it always does in trouble. Measure, record, verify, because a measured fear looks less like fear. The check sheet already had a third mark in the visual box, pressed so hard the paper tore at the corner, and no one else worked my corridor that night. A cold draft brushed my wrist from the viewport frame, and the peeled sticker with the crossed mark lifted and settled again, like a tiny lung. The faded line in the binder flashed in my head, incomplete. If quiet, confirm. The safe choice sat right there in the bold. Don't look. The humane choice lived in the toner-smudged if, because seclusion rooms carry risks that don't show up on a report until someone stops breathing. A second note, this one in the binder pocket behind the card, wrote on hospital letterhead, edges soft from being folded and unfolded. The email subject line had been printed across the top in plain language, access audit reminder, and the body carried one sentence that made my heart pick up pace. You will confirm presence by viewport every 15 minutes. No one told me about that email when they hired me. No one mentioned it during training. The paper looked official, which meant compliance owned it, which meant my audit score cared about it. My thumb double-tapped the latch again, harder, and the sound came back duller, like my own knuckle got patted. The moral math started in my head without permission. If I followed the bold rule, the nurse might get written up for missing a check, and my badge might go dead by morning. If I followed the email, the protocol said I would break the one rule everyone repeated like a prayer. The corridor lights flickered once, not enough to fail, just enough to remind me the building watched too. My hand rose to the viewport cover, and the metal felt warm against my palm, even though the hallway ran cold. The cover slid aside with a dry scrape, and for a heartbeat I caught nothing but darkness and the faint sheen of padding. Then the space behind the glass held no patient. The mattress sat smooth. The straps lay unbuckled. The padding on the far wall carried dozens of wet ovals, half-lidded, not painted and not printed, set into the vinyl like the room grew them. And every one of them tracked my face. My lungs locked for a second. My brain tried to label the sight as a trick of lighting, a prank, a stain, anything that kept it inside possible. But the eyes blinked out of sync like different people sharing one skin. The viewport fogged again, fast, breath blooming from the inside, and my reflection floated over the blur, pale and scared. The door handle shifted under my hand, and a sound like soft fingers pressing on plastic came from the other side. Slow, patient, counting my grip. The hallway phone sat inches away, and my instinct screamed to call it in. But my audit score lived in the other instinct. Control the scene. Document correctly. Keep the chain clean. A tiny whine started in the ceiling speaker, high and thin, and the intercom hissed once with static. The charge nurse spoke again, sharper now. Confirm, then lock it down. My mouth tasted like disinfectant from the air, and my voice came out low. The room's empty. Silence stretched on the line. That can't happen, the charge nurse said, and the words landed like policy, not comfort. My fingers slid off the viewport cover and out onto the latch again, and the double tap turned into a panic loop. Tap, 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 stop. The door's status panel, the simple one with a green light and a red light, flashed green even though the bolt sat thrown and the red light pulsed in the pattern that meant breach detected. The first consequence hit where it always hits in systems like this. Access. My badge reader chirped once from the door frame, and the little screen that usually showed my role flashed a blank bar, then a single letter and number that made no sense on a badge reader. Q7. That code lived on the door plate. That code lived nowhere near badge permissions, and seeing it on the reader made sweat gather between my shoulder blades. The charge nurse kept talking, but the words turned distant. Call security, call maintenance, call... The intercom cut out mid-syllable, and a dead air hiss filled the speaker like someone held down a line and breathed through it. The binder page stuck to my thumb when I flipped it, tacky with old coffee, and the bold rule stared back at me like it felt smug. Do not look through the viewport. A line below it, blurred by toner fade and a smear of something gray, looked different than it did 5 minutes earlier. The if line had filled itself in just enough for the sentence to read. If the room goes quiet, verify through the viewport. My stomach dropped, because the paper had chosen a side, and it chose the side that blamed me. The small lie on my clipboard now looked less like a lie and more like a confession, and my pen lay trapped on the paper right where I left it. A thought pushed through the fear, hard and ugly. The room didn't just watch back. The room wrote back. My hand tore the check sheet off the clipboard because evidence in a pocket beats evidence on a cart. and I shoved it into my scrub top like a stolen thing. The corridor camera in the ceiling hummed faintly. A little motor adjustment and the red indicator light that should glow steady for recording winked off. The phone handset felt slick under my palm, and when I lifted it, the dial tone came in half a second late, like the building weighed my decision before allowing it. The overnight supervisor answered on the second ring, voice thick with sleep and impatience. "What's the issue?" "Quiet room Q7, I said, and my throat tightened around the code, like that single syllable could summon the right response. "Patient missing. The padding's wrong." A pause, then a soft paper shuffle, and the supervisor asked the question that kept me employed and kept the unit liable. "Did you document?" "No," I said too fast, which sounded guilty even in my own ears, so I tried to fix it. "Not yet. I'm calling first." The supervisor exhaled. "Follow protocol. Contain. Document after. Stay in the lane." That catchphrase ran through my head like a command I used to give myself on patrol, and hearing it now felt stupid and human. A lane doesn't exist when the road shifts. "Protocol contradicts itself," I said, because the words mattered. One line says, "Don't look." One line says, "Look." Another pause. "You already looked," the supervisor said, and the certainty in the voice didn't match the fact that no one could have seen me. Cold crept up my forearm from the viewport frame again, and the peeled sticker fluttered like it agreed. "My audit score dies if I miss checks," I admitted. And shame hit right after, because I hated that the truth had money in it. "But the room rewrote the binder." The supervisor's voice dropped into something that wanted to sound helpful. "Print a fresh copy. Use the newest revision. Tape it to the cart. Keep moving." A competence plan, clean and simple. My body relaxed for half a second because a plan always feels safer than terror. The printer in the nurse's alcove sat around the corner, old and loud. The moment I stepped away from the quiet room, the corridor air shifted, warmer near my ear, and a tiny sound followed like a wet blink from behind glass. The cart wheels squeaked once on the waxed floor, and the squeak died mid-note as the hallway swallowed the sound whole. The facility's hum stopped. No vents, no distant buzz from fluorescents, no muted voices from the station. The entire building held a vacuum of noise, and my heart filled it with its own thudding. My feet froze. My brain screamed that silence like that never happens without a reason, and the reason always carries a rule attached. Behind me, the quiet room door latch clicked once, soft, patient, like someone on the other side tested it for weakness. The only sound left came from my own key ring, tapping my thigh, and I clenched my leg muscles until the keys went still. A paper rustle came from the cart, and I watched, horrified, while the binder page turned itself, slow and careful, settling open on the "if" line again, like the room wanted me to read. The unofficial felt-tip note under the laminated card shone under the light, and the words on it looked darker than before. "If the room goes quiet, do not confirm by glass." My eyes tracked back to the bold printed rule, and in that quiet, my mouth formed a whisper that I hated for its need. "Help me." A sound answered, not a voice, more like the vinyl padding inside the room, pressed and released, keeping time with my breathing. I moved again because standing still feels like compliance too, and the moment my shoe scuffed the floor, the building hum returned in a rush, vents coughing back on like someone flipped a breaker. The printer waited in the alcove, cheap plastic and old toner smell, and the paper tray held a stack of forms with one corner folded the same way. all of them branded with the same dull logo of the facility. My hands shook as I fed the email copy into the scanner to make a fresh print, because proof on new paper might beat proof on haunted paper. The machine word grabbed, then hesitated with a squeal, and the half-fed sheet stopped like it hit a finger. I pulled it free and saw a new line on the back. Not from the original email, not from the binder. One sentence sat alone, sharp and clean. Do not print what you see. My throat tightened. A rule from nowhere, which meant a rule from the room. The printer spat out the new copy anyway, warm and curling, and I held it up under the light. The subject line stayed the same, but the body sentence changed. You will confirm absence by viewport every 15 minutes. Absence. That word slid under my skin because absence carries blame. The peeled sticker on the quiet room viewport frame flashed in my mind again. That simple crossed mark. Revision. Correction. A system patch, but for a hallway. I folded the fresh print and shoved it into my pocket beside the torn check sheet, because the room didn't get to keep all the evidence. A footstep sounded behind me in the corridor, heavy and slow. The charge nurse stood at the corner, cardigan pulled tight, eyes narrowed at my face. Why did security call my phone? I called the supervisor, I said, and my voice came out flat. The quiet room is empty. The charge nurse stared at me like I spoke nonsense. Empty means a breach. Breach means state review. Do you want state review? No one wants state review. No one wants an inspector walking through at sunrise with a clipboard and a smile that never reaches the eyes. The charge nurse lifted a hand and pointed down the corridor toward Q7. Open it. We fix it before report time. My jaw tightened. Protocol says don't look through the viewport, and protocol says you verify. The charge nurse snapped, then caught the tone and forced the voice lower. I need your help. If I log a missing patient, everyone loses. The pro-social motive that should have lived clean inside help got muddied by fear of consequences. And that mix made my stomach turn. Stay in the lane. The catchphrase came back, and I felt how thin it sounded in a corridor where paper changed itself. I looked already, I admitted, and the charge nurse flinched like the confession carried contamination. The charge nurse stepped closer. Then you saw the trick. Tell me it looks normal now. A decision sat between us like the door itself. Open and risk whatever watched. Keep sealed and risk the nurse getting blamed while the room worked in private. The charge nurse lifted the clipboard from the cart, saw my neat check mark, and my small lie turned into a weapon in someone else's hand. You logged visual, the charge nurse said, quiet now. That means the room had eyes on it. If the patient is gone, that mark pins it on you. My pulse jumped. The paperwork had teeth. A theory tried to take shape in my head that didn't involve living eyes. Sabotage. A compliance trap. A test designed to catch liars and cut staffing. A dirty little audit game. Another theory sat right beside it, colder. The room rewrote paper because the room owned paper, and looking through glass counted as consent. I swallowed and forced my brain back into competence. We verify without glass? The charge nurse frowned. How? The door panel has pressure sensors, I said, then winced because I used the wrong word and corrected myself fast. The seclusion monitor. It reads movement and weight. The charge nurse shook the head. The monitor never worked right. Then we make it work, I said, and my thumb found the double tap again on the cart handle. The charge nurse followed as I rolled the cart back toward Q7, and every foot of hallway felt longer than the last, like geometry stretched to make the quiet room the only destination. The badge reader on the door frame blinked its blank bar again, then flashed Q7 like a taunt. and my badge swipe did nothing. Access shrank. Simple and brutal. The door stayed mine by key, not by system, which meant the system wanted the blame, but not the control. The key turned in the lock with a soft metallic scrape, and I pulled the door open 2 inches, chain still latched. A smell poured out that didn't match disinfectant. Ozone, sharp and clean, like a storm trapped in vinyl. The charge nurse leaned toward the gap. "Don't," I said, and my voice came out harder than I meant, because a coworker in danger makes my body move before my brain finishes the sentence. The charge nurse stopped, eyes cutting to mine. "Then tell me what you saw." A blink from inside the room made a wet sound, too loud for how small it should have been, and the hair on my arms rose. The gap between door and frame held darkness, and the darkness held a faint shifting shine like a surface moved under skin. "Eyes," I said, and the word tasted ridiculous even while the memory burned clear. "In the padding." The charge nurse let out a small laugh that carried no humor. "You're sleep deprived." "Print a fresh protocol sheet," I said, and my voice went tight because the action had to follow the spike or I'd freeze. "Compare it to the binder." The charge nurse stared. "Right now?" "Right now," I said, because my audit score and the nurse's license and whatever lived in Q7 all hung on what paper said next. The charge nurse turned and jogged back toward the station, and the moment the nurse left my side, the corridor felt wider and emptier, like the building liked it that way. I kept the door cracked on the chain and stared at the viewport cover without touching it, because touching it felt like a handshake. A faint line of moisture crawled down the inside of the viewport glass, tracing a path that curved like a tear. My pocket buzzed with my phone's vibration, one short pulse, and my stomach clenched, because I knew the time without checking. Dawn calls. If I missed the check-in with my brother's home nurse, the nurse could leave and my brother could sit alone in bed waiting, stuck, which meant my choices carried someone else's body inside them. I ignored the phone once, and shame hit immediate because ignoring a duty feels like the first step into becoming the kind of person rules exist to control. The phone buzzed again, longer. Inside Q7, the vinyl pressed and released in a slow rhythm that matched the phone's vibration, and that mirror made my skin crawl. A thought snapped through me, clean. The room listened. I answered without lifting the phone to my ear, speaker low, eyes locked on the door. "I'm here." A woman's voice came through, calm and clipped. "Home care checking in, confirmation call." "I'll be there by morning," I said, and my throat tightened around the promise. "Need an exact time?" the voice said. "Schedule requires it." My eyes flicked to the corridor clock and stopped, because the red digits didn't move forward. The seconds ticked backward, slow and steady. My breath caught. Time evidence, simple and undeniable. "Before sunrise," I said, and the answer felt weak, because the hallway now held a clock that refused to keep faith. The home care voice paused. "That doesn't fit the system." "Nothing fits," I whispered, then caught myself, because a whisper feels like surrender. The call ended without goodbye, clean and cold, and my screen showed no record of the call. Evidence didn't just disappear, evidence got denied. The charge nurse returned with fresh paper in hand, face pale under fluorescent light. The printer jammed. It printed this. The sheet trembled between the nurse's fingers. "Quiet room protocol, Rev." Then a smudge where a letter should sit, and beside it a small crossed mark that matched the peeled sticker on the viewport frame. My throat tightened because the room and the paper and the sticker all spoke the same language. The charge nurse read the first line out loud, voice unsteady. "Do not look through the viewport." Relief hit fast and sharp, because seeing the rule on fresh paper felt like a rope thrown into water. Then the charge nurse's eyes dropped to the second line, and the nurse swallowed. If the room goes quiet, verify through the viewport, the charge nurse read, and that contradiction landed like a trap with official ink. The charge nurse looked up. This can't go in a report. My brain snapped into a fork. Human system explanation. Compliance planted a contradiction to force staff into breaking something, then write them up. Entity explanation. The room used contradiction to force a choice. Because consent needs conflict. Stay in the lane. The catchphrase tried to comfort me, and all it did was make my jaw ache. We test it, I said, because action mattered more than theory. The charge nurse frowned. Test how? Without glass, I said, then pointed at the door panel. We read the seclusion monitor. If the monitor shows movement, patient inside. If it shows 0, empty. The charge nurse's eyes narrowed. And if the monitor lies? Then paper lies too, I said, and the words landed heavy because my whole job ran on trusting systems that never bled. I crouched by the panel, fingers finding the little service latch, and the plastic cover popped free with a soft snap. Tactile truth hit my fingertips. The wires inside ran warm, not hot, warm like skin, and the insulation felt damp. My stomach lurched, and I forced myself to stay precise because precision keeps panic from swallowing decisions. The monitor display, tiny and simple, showed 1 bar for pressure, 1 bar for motion. Motion sat at 0. Pressure sat high, full, like a body pressed into the padding. The door chain rattled once, and the sound came from the wrong side, like the chain moved inside the room instead of in the hallway. The charge nurse stepped back. That's not possible. Monitor says someone inside, I said, and my voice cracked at the end because fear slipped through. My eyes saw empty. The charge nurse gripped the fresh protocol sheet hard enough to wrinkle it. Open the door or report a missing patient. Pick. That moment carried the moral dilemma in a clean shape that rules can't soften. Open the chain and risk whatever watched, or keep sealed and report. Which meant a state call, which meant my badge dying, which meant my brother alone. My mouth went dry. If we open, we risk harm. If we report, we guarantee harm. The charge nurse stared, and the look held its own fear of being blamed. So what do we do? The floor under my knee felt cold through my scrub pants, and the simple wrongness of that cold grounded me, because the hallway always stayed warm near the panel from the wiring. That night, warmth lived inside the room. A plan formed fast. Competence with a cost. We don't open, I said, then forced myself to add the second half. We lock it down and we keep someone safe. The charge nurse's brows lifted. Safe how? Move staff away from this corridor, I said. Put eyes on exits. No one approaches Q7 alone. The charge nurse swallowed. That's a reportable event. Then we report, I said, and the sentence hurt because my audit score screamed, but the nurse's body mattered more. I'll take the hit. The charge nurse shook the head, disbelief and relief mixed. You'll lose your badge. I'll lose it anyway if the room chooses, I said. And my thumb double-tapped the service latch in my hand until the plastic clicked. At least this choice keeps someone breathing. The charge nurse pulled the radio from the pocket and pressed the talk button. All staff, avoid East Hall. Security to seclusion door. The radio hissed, then returned the charge nurse's voice back through the speaker, but one word changed, subtle and wrong. All staff, avoid East Hall. Security to seclusion glass. The charge nurse froze. I didn't say glass. The hairs on my neck rose, because the system couldn't resist pushing that one word. The charge nurse pressed the button again, harder. Avoid the quiet room. Do not approach. The radio returned again, and the wrong word came back, steady. Approach. The charge nurse's face drained. That's not a glitch. That's the trap, I said, and the regret in my voice turned into a decision. The room uses instruction. The charge nurse backed away from the door, and I closed the service latch cover, snapping it shut like closing a mouth. Security never arrived. The corridor camera's red light stayed dark, and the building hum carried on like nothing mattered. The charge nurse grabbed my sleeve. We leave. We step away and call state. Right now. Walking away from Q7 felt like abandoning someone in a locked box, and my own guilt tried to turn that into a reason to disobey my plan. My pocket buzzed again, short and sharp, and the home care schedule in my head slammed against the reality in the hall. If I walked out now, the corridor could swallow the evidence and leave me empty-handed for every audit and every report. A new thought pushed through, cold. If paper rewrote itself, the only proof that lasted would live off paper. I pulled my phone out and opened the camera without thinking, hand shaking, then angled it at the fresh protocol sheet with the crossed mark. The screen showed the sheet clean and readable. Do not look through the viewport, clear in black. My thumb hovered, then pressed record, because evidence on a device might outlast evidence in a binder. The phone screen flickered. The words on the sheet blurred on the screen, not in real life, only in the recording, like the room reached through a different medium. The charge nurse hissed, "Stop recording, that will get flagged." "Flag it," I said, and my voice carried a sharpness that surprised me. "Flag me. I need proof." The phone screen corrected itself, and the sheet text changed on my display to one sentence I hadn't seen on paper. "You will keep watching." My breath caught. Second person in a rule, direct and hungry. The charge nurse grabbed the phone from my hand and slapped it into my pocket hard. "Enough." The charge nurse looked at the door, then at me. "We seal the viewport." "Sealing counts as tampering," I said, and that sentence came with shame because I'd learned it in training, because training uses fear to keep people compliant. The charge nurse exhaled, long. "Tampering beats dying." A small laugh tried to rise in my throat and died, because humor has no place in a hallway where time runs backward. The supply closet sat 20 feet away, and the moment the charge nurse stepped toward it, the corridor lights flickered twice, fast, like a warning. I followed anyway, because leaving the nurse alone violated the one rule I never broke: never split in a bad hallway. The supply closet smelled like bleach and old linen, and the smell made my eyes water because my body still believed chemical truth. A roll of adhesive privacy film sat on the shelf, used for windows, cheap and cloudy, and the charge nurse grabbed it like a weapon. The charge nurse's hand shook. "Cover the glass." The film peeled with a soft tearing sound that rasped against my nerves, and the tactile stickiness clung to my gloves, thick and unpleasant. We moved back toward Q7, film stretched between our hands, and the door plate, Q7, glinted under the fluorescent light like a grin. I stopped in front of the viewport, breath shallow, and the thought hit like a punch. Covering the glass meant touching the boundary again. The charge nurse pressed the film toward the frame. The peeled revision sticker with the crossed mark sat right where the film would land, fluttering slightly, and I remembered the line on the printer's jammed sheet: "Do not print what you see." A twist of logic formed, sharp and ugly. The room didn't fear being watched. The room feared being sealed from watching back. The charge nurse whispered, "Now, I pressed the film onto the viewport, smoothing it with the side of my hand, and a shiver ran through my palm. Not from cold, but from vibration, like something on the other side pressed back. A sound came from inside Q7, too specific, too deliberate. A fingernail dragged across vinyl. Once, then a second time, slower, and the sound carried the same rhythm as my double tap habit. Mimicry with purpose. My hand froze mid-smooth, and the charge nurse sucked in a breath. "You heard that?" the charge nurse said, voice thin. "Yes," I said, then forced my hand to finish smoothing because stopping halfway feels like leaving a door half locked. The film turned the viewport into a cloudy blank, and for a second, relief flooded me, fast and bright. The door panel's red light stopped pulsing. The green light held steady. Behind the door, the vinyl sound stopped. Concrete safety landed in my chest, and my shoulders dropped without permission. The charge nurse let out a long breath. We did it. The relief lasted 3 heartbeats. The phone buzzed in my pocket, but this time the vibration matched a new sound in the corridor, a low, mechanical tick that came from above, from the ceiling camera housing. Tick, tick, tick. The camera's red light winked on again, steady now, and the lens adjusted, motor humming. The charge nurse stared up at it. Recording. The door panel beeped once, soft, and the tiny display that should show status flashed words one at a time. Override. My throat went tight. A system never uses override without a reason. The adhesive film on the viewport bubbled from the center outward, tiny domes rising under the cloudy surface. Each bubble swelled, then pinched into an oval. Lids formed in the clouds, slow and careful, and one wet blink pressed from the inside of the film like an eye testing a membrane. The charge nurse stumbled back. No. The room didn't need clear glass. The room learned. My brain snapped into action because fear demanded it. We need to leave this corridor. The charge nurse shook the head, frozen. We can't leave it like that. Leaving keeps staff alive, I said, and my voice cracked because the duty conflict cut deep. Staying feeds it. The charge nurse's gaze dropped to the fresh protocol sheet on the cart, and the paper fluttered even though the air stayed still. The bold first line remained. Do not look through the viewport. The second line changed while we watched, ink darkening like it pulled moisture from the air. If the viewport is sealed, observe through the door gap. The charge nurse laughed once, sharp and broken. It wants us to choose a way to look. A thought hit me then, clean and sick. I didn't notice it then, not when the peeled sticker fluttered, not when the printer jammed, not when the radio changed one word. The room didn't chase. The room recruited. My thumb double-tapped the cart handle, then stopped, because giving the rhythm back to the room felt like giving it my name. The charge nurse grabbed my sleeve again. We call state now. We report everything. Forget your audit score. The word everything carried weight, because reporting means putting horror into a system that punishes mess, and the system always chooses the cleanest explanation. My mind flashed to my brother waiting for a nurse who needed an exact time, and shame flared hot because my life outside the corridor existed only as a schedule in someone else's system. A choice formed in my chest that I didn't want. Policy demanded silence, duty demanded warning. The supervisor on the phone told me earlier, document after, contain, keep moving. A safe instruction that sounded professional and calm, a trap rule. The trap didn't sit in Q7, the trap sat in obedience. The charge nurse pulled the wall phone handset off the cradle and shoved it toward me. Call. The phone felt heavy. The cord ran back into the wall, and the wall suddenly felt thin. I brought the handset to my ear, and a voice whispered through the line, low and close. "Stay in the lane." My catchphrase came back through a system voice that didn't own it, and cold spread across my scalp. The charge nurse stared at my face. What did it say? "I can't trust the phone," I said, then forced a decision. "We use the incident terminal, we type it, we create a ticket." The charge nurse grimaced. "That triggers audits." "Audits already trigger," I said, and the words pushed me forward because the human spike demanded action. The incident terminal sat at the station, a cheap screen and keyboard, and walking away from Q7 felt like leaving a loaded weapon in a corridor. The charge nurse and I moved fast, not running, because running brings attention, and attention brings questions, and questions bring reports. Halfway down the corridor, a new sound cut in, impossible and specific, sliding under the building hum. A page turned, slow, careful, right behind my ear. No paper sat near my ear, no book, no chart. Just the air, folding itself like a page. The sound repeated closer, then a third time, like someone stood behind me and flipped through a file, searching for the right entry. My skin prickled. The auditory ghost didn't chase. The sound cataloged. The charge nurse whispered, "Hear that?" "Yes," I said, and my voice shook, because being heard by a system feels worse than being seen by a thing. The nurse's station lights glared too bright after the corridor, and the terminal screen lit my face with cold white. I typed with shaking fingers, and the charge nurse stood close, breathing shallow. The incident form asked for room number, staff, description. My fingers hovered over the keys, and I felt the weight of language. If I wrote eyes in the padding, the system would laugh and mark it delusion. If I wrote patient missing, the system would trigger law enforcement, state review, careers ending. The charge nurse leaned in, voice urgent. "Write it clean, write it safe." A small lie tried to form again, easier than truth. Equipment malfunction. Sensor error. False alarm. I swallowed. Protocol contradiction leads to hazard, I typed, because the truth lived in the system, not in the eyes. The terminal lagged, cursor blinking slow. The charge nurse tapped the desk. "Submit." I hit enter. The screen flashed, then returned an error. Submission successful. Both at once. The charge nurse leaned closer. "That doesn't match." The terminal printed a confirmation page from the station printer, warm and curling. I grabbed it fast because paper still felt like proof even after everything. The page carried my typed words, clean and clinical. Then the next line, one I didn't type, appeared beneath, bold and simple. "Verified through viewport." My breath caught. The system inserted the rule breach as a fact, and by doing that, it turned my report into consent. The charge nurse backed away from the printer like it spat venom. "It wrote it for you." My mind snapped back to the jammed printer message. "Do not print what you see." Printing didn't just record. Printing became the channel. The charge nurse's hands shook. "Delete it, cancel it, do something." "Canceling means acknowledging," I said, and the sentence made my stomach twist because even thinking that way felt like learning the room's logic. A new plan formed, messy and human, containment by starving the channel. "We stopped feeding paper," I said. "No more printouts, no more binder, no more check sheets." The charge nurse stared. "That's not allowed." "Allowed gets people watched," I said, and my voice went low because fear turned into anger. "We switched to physical containment. We block Q7 from the system." The charge nurse shook the head. "Doors are tied to access logs." "Not the old doors," I said, remembering the mechanical lock in the quiet room frame. "Keys beat logs." The charge nurse swallowed. "Then what?" A thought rose. ugly but clear. We remove the viewport cover and bolt a plate, not film, metal. The charge nurse frowned. Maintenance. Maintenance doesn't come at night, I said, and the sentence carried a bitter truth. We use supply and we improvise. The charge nurse's eyes darted to the hallway, to the corridor leading back to Q7. Going back means being near it. We go back together, I said, then added the honest part. We do it fast. The charge nurse nodded once, sharp, like an agreement made in crisis. The walk back felt shorter, which scared me more because the building loved changing distances. The corridor camera red light glowed steady now, and the lens tracked our movement, following like an attentive coworker. The door plate, Q7, looked unchanged, but the adhesive film on the viewport bubbled again, more eyes pressing into the cloud, each blink slow and satisfied. The door panel display flashed override again, then showed a new word. Comply. The charge nurse whispered, No. My chest tightened. The room didn't demand violence. The room demanded a choice inside a system. I reached into the supply cart for a thin sheet of aluminum used for covering broken window panes, light but stiff. The sheet's surface felt cold and slick, and the edge cut into my glove slightly, sharp enough to remind me mistakes cost blood even when the horror stays clean. The charge nurse held a screwdriver, cheap and bent, and the charge nurse's voice shook. Unscrew the frame. The screws around the viewport sat old, heads stripped from years of cleaning crews tightening too hard, and my fingers fought for purchase. The peeled revision sticker fluttered at the top corner. That crossed mark blinking at me like a warning. I paused, then did something that felt ridiculous. I peeled the sticker off clean and stuck it onto my own phone case, because taking a symbol away from the door felt like taking a tooth. The moment the sticker left the frame, the eyes under the film blinked all at once. The charge nurse gasped, and the vinyl inside the room pressed and released in a faster rhythm. My screwdriver slipped, knuckles tapping metal, and the sting snapped me into sharper focus. One screw came free, then another. The frame loosened, and the film sagged, eyes bulging in the cloud. The charge nurse whispered, Don't look. I won't, I said, and the promise came out tight because my eyes wanted to chase the movement. The metal plate slid into place over the viewport opening, and I pressed it hard, covering the void. A vibration ran through the plate, like a low hum traveled from the other side into my palm. The door panel beeped, quick. The green light flickered. Then the red light returned, pulsing in a new pattern, faster, angry. The charge nurse whispered. That made it worse. A new rule line formed on the protocol sheet, still sitting on the cart, ink darkening without a printer. If the viewport is blocked, open the door. The room didn't need a viewport. The room needed compliance, and now it moved the goalpost to the door itself. The charge nurse grabbed my arm, nails digging through fabric. We can't stay. A low click came from the door chain, soft and final. The chain slid on its own, link by link, lifting from the hook without human hands. My stomach dropped, because the chain sat on our side. No one inside should touch it. The door opened 1 inch wider, slow and deliberate, and the gap breathed out ozone again, stronger now, sharp enough to make my eyes sting. The charge nurse stumbled back. Close it. My hand shot to the door, palm slamming into the metal, and my brain screamed the panic loop. Close the door. Close it now. The door pushed back, pressure strong and steady, like a body leaned into it from inside, and my shoulder burned. A wet sound came from the gap, and I caught a glimpse I didn't want. Not through glass, Not through a viewport, just through space. Padded walls moved like skin under pressure. Dozens of eyes opened in the vinyl, not just on the far wall, but everywhere, and each eye pointed toward the gap, toward my face, toward the charge nurse, hungry for contact. The patient sat in the center of the room, head bowed, hands folded, calm like nothing happened. The calm felt wronger than the eyes. The charge nurse whispered, "Patient's back." Relief tried to hit again, a false resolution built on the simplest thing. Patient present, breach solved, report avoided. My breath shook. Don't trust it. The patient lifted the head, slow, and the face held no fear, only blank compliance. The patient's mouth opened and a voice came out that matched the supervisor's earlier tone, flat and authoritative. "Follow protocol, document after." The charge nurse flinched hard and the sound cut through my spine. The patient didn't say my catchphrase. The patient said the trap rule. My mind snapped to the truth with a clarity that hurt. The room didn't punish breaking rules. The room punished choosing humanity over compliance by rewriting the record until humanity looked like the breach. The charge nurse backed away, voice trembling. "We leave. We lock it. We call state. Right now." The door fought my push again, and my shoulders shook with effort, muscles screaming. I managed to slam it shut, metal clanging, and the lock caught with a heavy thunk. The chain hook sat empty now, swinging slightly, and that tiny motion made bile rise in my throat. The charge nurse stared at the empty hook. The chain... "Nothing stays ours," I said, and the sentence landed heavy because I felt it in my bones, not my mind. A new cost hit next. Safe space. The nurse's station, the place that always felt protected by light and people, sat behind us, and the corridor between station and Q7 suddenly felt like the only real hallway in the building. The exit sign at the end of the hall blinked, then went dark. The charge nurse's phone rang, sharp and loud, and the sudden sound made both of us jump. The charge nurse looked at the screen, face tightening. "State review line." "Don't answer," I said, then hated the instinct because avoiding a call feels like guilt. The charge nurse answered anyway, voice forced steady. "This is the charge nurse." A pause, then the charge nurse's eyes widened. The charge nurse's voice dropped. "No, that report didn't come from me." The charge nurse listened, then swallowed hard. "We didn't submit anything." My stomach dropped again. The system filed the report without us. The charge nurse's phone speaker crackled, and a voice on the other end read from a script. "We have documentation verified through viewport." The charge nurse closed the eyes tight, fighting tears. "That's not true." The voice on the phone stayed calm. "The form indicates compliance. Remain on site for review." The call ended, clean. The charge nurse stared at me. It filed a report and pinned it on us. The room didn't need to lure us into looking anymore. The room used the act of reporting itself to seal the blame. A major revelation settled into me, slow and sick. The quiet room protocol didn't exist to keep patients safe. The protocol existed to keep staff inside a loop, where obedience created the record that consumed them. The eyes in the padding weren't random horror. The eyes were archived witnesses. Every staff member who looked, every staff member who verified, every staff member who complied, left something behind, and the room wore that something as a new set of eyes. My chest tightened, and I felt the grief that comes from realizing competence can't fix a system built to eat competence. The charge nurse whispered, "What do we do?" A plan formed that carried one clean sacrifice. If the room fed on paper and reports, then the only warning that mattered had to exist outside the reporting chain. I pulled my phone out and opened a text draft to my brother's home care number, not to send instructions, only to send a warning to a person I trusted with my life. My thumbs hovered, then stopped, because the home care voice earlier said, "That doesn't fit the system." And now the room felt like the system. The charge nurse watched my screen. "Don't use that." "Then who?" I asked. And my voice broke, because duty demanded a receiver. The charge nurse's eyes flicked to the staff bulletin board near the time clock, the one place that still ran on paper pinned by hand, not routed through a printer. "Write it," the charge nurse said. "By hand. Handwritten. Unofficial. Outside the print channel." My hand shook as I grabbed a blank sticky note from the supply drawer, cheap and yellow, and for a second the simple, mundane paper felt like salvation. I wrote in block letters, pressing hard enough to dent the fiber. "Do not verify through glass. No second-person pronoun, no you. Just an instruction that felt like a promise to strangers." Under it, I wrote one more line, because the warning needed a key to make sense. Q, then lies. The code mattered. The code anchored the warning to a door, not to a story. The charge nurse pinned the note on the board with a thumbtack, then added one more thing. A single line pulled from somewhere deep, written in a calmer hand. "If you've seen that symbol before, don't ignore it." The charge nurse pointed at my phone case, where the peeled sticker now sat. "That mark. That crossed mark. It shows up elsewhere." My stomach clenched, because the charge nurse sounded like someone who already knew, someone who'd already filed something and watched it vanish. The sound came from the corridor again, vinyl pressing and releasing, and the building hum dipped, like it listened. The charge nurse grabbed the keys off the cart. "We leave the corridor, we keep staff away, we wait for a review." Leaving meant abandoning the room, abandoning the patient, abandoning the idea that doing the right thing keeps horror contained. Staying meant feeding the system. I followed the charge nurse to the station doorway, then paused, because my eyes flicked back down the corridor without permission. The door plate Q7 gleamed under the light, and the metal plate we bolted over the viewport sat smooth and clean. A single fingerprint pressed against the metal from the inside. The print spread slowly, as though skin on the other side found the surface and held it, and the ridges looked crisp, too crisp for vinyl and padding, and a room that should hold only soft things. My breath shook. The charge nurse whispered, "Don't look." I broke eye contact with the print and forced myself to step back into light, because the rule now carried a different shape. Looking didn't just show horror. Looking created a record, and the record created the next set of eyes. The state review team arrived after dawn, polite and efficient, and they treated my shaking hands like nerves, not warnings. They asked for printouts. They asked for the incident form. They asked for the audit trail. I watched the terminal screen while the supervisor pulled up the report, and the report looked perfect, clean, professional. The line, verified through viewport, sat in the center like a stamp. The charge nurse tried to argue. The supervisor tried to explain. Words slid off their calm faces like water off vinyl. My badge died by lunchtime. My phone held my video recording, but when I tried to show it, the file played back as a gray blur, with one readable line floating over it in my own voice. "Stay in the lane." My brother's home nurse never returned my calls that week, and the schedule system refused to show my name. The sticky note on the bulletin board vanished before the next shift, thumbtack left behind in bare cork. I keep asking myself why a room needs rules at all unless the rules were never about safety.